Picture this. It is the dead of night along the Iranian coast of the Strait of Hormuz. A deep, eerie silence hangs over the water. No tankers, no shipping lights, just darkness pressing in from all sides. And then, without warning, the sky tears open. Bomber aircraft, invisible to radar, begin their descent toward Iran's most fortified underground positions. Positions built over decades, buried beneath mountains, reinforced with layers upon layers of concrete and rock. Positions that were supposed to be untouchable. They were not untouchable. What unfolded over the next several weeks was not just a military campaign. It was a historic turning point for global energy security, for the balance of power in the Middle East, and for the doctrine of asymmetric naval warfare that Iran had spent over 40 years perfecting. A doctrine that in a matter of days was reduced to rubble. To understand how we got here, you need to understand what Iran was actually trying to do. This was never just about shutting down shipping lanes. This was a calculated strategic play executed at the worst possible moment for the global economy. Coordinated airstrikes were launched against Iran under a campaign that would become known for its ferocity. The opening salvo was devastating. According to reporting from multiple defense sources, the operation targeted Iranian missiles, air defenses, military infrastructure, and Iranian leadership, conducting nearly 900 strikes in just the first 12 hours. The opening strike killed Iran's supreme leader. Iran's response was immediate and escalatory. Retaliatory missile and drone barges struck military bases, allied territory, and commercial shipping in the Strait of Hormuz. And then Iran played what it believed was its trump card. It closed the Strait of Hormuz. Think about what that actually means. The strait is 21 miles wide at its narrowest point. It is the single most critical choke point in global energy infrastructure. Roughly 20 million barrels of oil per day, nearly 20% of all global seaborne oil trade, flows through that narrow passage. Before the conflict, approximately 138 ships passed through daily. Within weeks, that number had collapsed to just 3. 3 ships per day in a strait that normally sees 138. Brent crude oil surpassed $100 per barrel for the first time in 4 years, eventually peaking at $126 per barrel. The closure has been described as the largest disruption to energy supply since the 1970s energy crisis. Not the Gulf War, not the Iraq War, the 1970s. This was the scale of the crisis, and Iran knew exactly what it was doing. To enforce this blockade, Iran deployed a layered strategy of terror. First, the mines. At least a dozen limpet mines were laid in the strait, silent, invisible, designed to deny passage to any vessel that dared approach. Second, Iranian fast attack boats. Hundreds of affiliated speedboats operated in swarm configurations, attacking commercial ships from multiple angles simultaneously. Iran confirmed at least 21 attacks on merchant ships, including fatal strikes on tankers. Third, and most critically, Iran's shore-launched anti-ship cruise missiles. These included advanced variants capable of covering 200 to 300 kilometers of the strait, and the most dangerous of all, a missile with a range exceeding 1,000 kilometers, capable of striking vessels as far away as the Gulf of Oman. These missiles were hidden in hardened underground bunkers carved into the mountainous terrain along Iran's coastline. They had been constructed over decades, protected by thick concrete and solid rock, practically immune to conventional airstrikes. Practically, but not entirely. Here is where it gets interesting. Because the military was not going to allow Iran to strangle the global economy, and it had been preparing for exactly this scenario. The response came in 2 distinct phases, each one more precise and more devastating than the last. Phase 1, the underground strike. Confirmation came that forces had successfully employed multiple 5,000-pound deep penetrator munitions on hardened Iranian missile sites along Iran's coastline near the Strait of Hormuz. The weapon in question was a 5,000-pound advanced penetrator, and it was making its combat debut. Let us take a moment to fully appreciate what this weapon is because the engineering is nothing short of extraordinary. This bomb is a precision-guided bunker-busting bomb weighing exactly 5,000 pounds, approximately 2,270 kilograms. It uses a GPS and inertial guidance system, allowing it to strike targets with an accuracy of just a few meters regardless of weather conditions. Clouds, smoke, darkness, None of it matters. But the truly remarkable part is what happens when it hits. The bomb's elongated steel body is engineered to minimize air resistance and concentrate force onto a smaller surface area on impact. It does not detonate on the surface. It plunges through. It can penetrate 100 feet of earth or over 20 feet of reinforced concrete before its delayed fuse triggers detonation. When it finally explodes, it does so in a confined underground space. The pressure has nowhere to go. The shock wave expands inward, collapsing the structure from within. This is not a bomb that destroys a bunker from the outside. It destroys it from the inside. Multiple such bombs were dropped on the hardened underground caves along the northern shores of the Strait of Hormuz. The targets housed Iran's most dangerous anti-ship cruise missiles, the very weapons that had turned every passing tanker into a potential casualty. According to official statements, the strikes destroyed the underground structures from within. Iran's decades-old infrastructure, built to survive any conventional attack, was gone in a single night. The commander confirmed the results with stark clarity. Iran's missile stockpile had been reduced by 90%. That is not a wound. That is the destruction of a capability. But here is where military planners understood something crucial. Destroying the missile sites was not enough. Because even with the underground arsenal neutralized, Iran still had threats moving on the surface of the strait. Fast, agile, and extremely deadly threats. Enter Phase 2, the surface war. A legendary attack aircraft, designed in the 1970s, became a decisive weapon in this maritime conflict. There is a reason for that, and it is worth understanding. At the heart of this aircraft is a 7-barreled 30mm rotary cannon capable of firing nearly 4,000 rounds per minute. Its armor-piercing rounds can shred a small, fast attack boat in seconds. But the aircraft's true advantage is not just its firepower. It is its ability to fly low and slow, at propeller-driven aircraft speeds, not jet speeds. This allows it to patrol a target area for extended periods, maintaining what military planners call persistent loiter time. It can also carry precision-guided missiles and unguided rockets. In short, it is simultaneously a long-endurance surveillance platform and an immediate fire support machine. According to official statements, these aircraft were deployed specifically to hunt and destroy Iran's fast attack boat swarms in the Strait of Hormuz. And they were not alone. Attack helicopters operated in full coordination, using their own missiles and cannons to eliminate mobile threats along the coastline. The dual combination was decisive. The small boat fleet that had previously been disrupting shipping traffic began suffering catastrophic losses. Iran's hundreds of fast attack boats, the backbone of its asymmetric naval strategy, became the hunted. And crucially, the persistent presence of these aircraft in the air had a secondary effect that cannot be overstated. While those aircraft were airborne, no Iranian vessel could surface to lay additional mines. The mine-sweeping operations already underway became dramatically safer. The attack aircraft was not just a weapon, it was a shield. There is one more critical development that changed the calculus in the strait entirely. And it came not from the air, but from the sea surface itself. For the first time, it was confirmed that unmanned drone boats were actively patrolling the Strait of Hormuz during the operation. These autonomous speedboats, approximately 5 meters long, are capable of fully autonomous navigation. They conducted patrols covering over 450 hours during the operation with an operational range exceeding 2,200 nautical miles. Their primary missions were surveillance and early warning, but they carried a secondary capability that Iran's fast attack boat crews needed to understand very clearly. When necessary, these vessels can be weaponized as direct kamikaze attack vehicles. Iran had early in the conflict attacked oil tankers twice using naval drones. There had been criticism for being slow to counter this asymmetric threat. The deployment of this drone boat fleet was the response. The other side was now playing its own asymmetric game. Then came the strategic decapitation. A critical nighttime operation fundamentally altered the course of the crisis. The commander of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy, the highest-ranking officer directly responsible for the Strait of Hormuz closure and mine-laying operations, was killed in an airstrike in the strategic port city of Bandar Abbas. The message to the Iranian leadership could not have been more direct. We will track you down one by one. The The Secretary of Defense summarized the situation during a cabinet meeting in a single sentence that said everything that needed to be said. Iran, he stated, no longer has a navy or a naval commander. Let that land for a moment. Not weakened, not degraded, gone. This assessment is supported by independent military analysis. According to detailed examination of the collapse of Iran's naval defense, forces destroyed or incapacitated more than 120 Iranian naval vessels since the operation began. Major naval facilities at Bandar Abbas, the entrance to the strait itself, along with installations at other ports in the Gulf of Oman, were struck within the first hours of the conflict using cruise missiles launched from naval destroyers. Within days, 20 Iranian naval vessels had already been confirmed sunk or critically damaged. The satellite imagery of the Bandar Abbas base told its own story. The large support ship ablaze at its pier. But zoom out from the individual events, and a much larger picture emerges. What was the full scope of this campaign? The air campaign that made all of this possible was sustained, systematic, and historically unprecedented in its intensity. Stealth bombers departing from the mainland on 37-hour non-stop missions within flight refueling struck Iran's deep underground facilities using 2,000-pound penetrator bombs. Iran's air defense systems could not detect them. They were invisible. Supersonic long-range bombers conducted 34-hour global strike missions against Iran's anti-ship missile depots using their speed and massive payload capacity to deliver precision-guided bombs against coastal batteries and underground silos. Heavy strategic bombers joined the campaign in early March, striking drone depots, torpedo production facilities, and coastal launch pads, maintaining continuous pressure over Iranian territory for hours at a time. By the operation's fifth week, more than 11,000 targets had been struck, more than 11,000 combat sorties had been flown, and over 150 Iranian vessels had been damaged or destroyed. Earlier in the campaign, that number had already passed 90 vessels, demonstrating the extraordinary pace at which Iranian naval capability was being eliminated. The military leadership addressed the scale of these operations directly, stating that the military was crushing Iran's weapon stockpiles, destroying their missiles and drone factories at levels nobody ever thought was possible, and turning their defense industrial base into nothing. The operation was not merely targeting active weapon systems, but was systematically dismantling the broader defense industrial base, the production facilities, the logistics networks, the command infrastructure that would allow Iran to regenerate its capabilities over time. This included a naval drone storage facility near the strait identified and completely destroyed within 8 days. An attack drone production facility in the capital rendered inoperative less than a week after identification. A critical military depot responsible for producing light and heavyweight torpedoes was struck and its production buildings destroyed. This was not just a military operation. This was the systematic erasure of Iran's capacity to fight this kind of war again. And yet, and this is the part that the headlines often miss, Iran is not yet finished. Even after all of this, Iran still possesses asymmetric options, hidden mobile launchers that survive the campaign, stockpiled drones. Iran's capacity to produce certain types of kamikaze drones in large quantities has not been fully eliminated. And critically, the mines already laid in the strait are still there awaiting clearance. Mine clearing operations, as military analysts have noted, are expected to take weeks. Iran recognized, even as its conventional military capability crumbled, that it still held economic leverage. In an extraordinary move, Tehran was demanding a $2 million transit fee from some tankers attempting to pass through the strait while allowing its own oil and ships from friendly nations to proceed. Ships from 5 nations, including major powers and regional neighbors, were allowed to transit. Other nations gained access through diplomatic engagement. This tells you something important about Tehran's strategy. It was not purely military. It was economic warfare. The strait was being used as both a weapon and a toll booth. The campaign has significantly weakened both levers, but they have not been fully neutralized. So where does this leave the world? The numbers tell a story of slow but real progress. Before the conflict, 138 ships passed through the strait daily. Within weeks, that had collapsed to 3. By the end of March, according to the data available, the number of daily crossings had climbed back to approximately 15, still well below normal, but the trajectory is unmistakably upward. The commander put it plainly. The lock on the Strait of Hormuz hasn't been fully opened yet, but the majority of the locking mechanism has been shattered. The short-term projection, according to military and energy analysts, is that 60 to 70% of normal strait traffic could return within weeks, provided mine-clearing operations proceed as planned, and Iran does not successfully reconstitute its asymmetric capabilities. But here is where the story becomes genuinely global, because the military is not fighting this alone anymore. A critical diplomatic development unfolded that signaled a shift in coalition dynamics. The leaders of multiple nations issued a joint statement explicitly condemning Iran's mine-laying, drone attacks, and strait blockade. They announced they were prepared to make concrete contributions to restore safe passage. They were not alone. A total of 22 countries pledged support. This was not merely symbolic diplomacy. One ally became the coalition's operational vanguard. Its navy officially confirmed plans to deploy unmanned mine-hunting drones and autonomous surface vehicles, systems designed to detect and neutralize Iranian mines from a safe distance using acoustic and magnetic signature mimicry to trigger controlled detonations without risking human lives. An energy secretary stated clearly that every option, including mine-hunting drones, was under active examination. Military experts were dispatched to coordinate directly with forces in the region, and a destroyer was deployed to the eastern Mediterranean with bases made available for strike operations. This was a signature contribution, technology-assisted mine clearance. While airstrikes hit from above, autonomous systems targeted the invisible threat beneath the surface of the water. The division of labor was precise. The alliance was real. And with approximately 50,000 military personnel currently deployed across the region supporting the operation, the operational capacity to sustain and expand these efforts was formidable. But let us be honest about what was not happening at the same time, because it matters. Multiple allies declined the initial call to send warships to secure the Strait of Hormuz. Several nations first ruled out direct naval contributions. The frustration was not hidden. It was said that some allies were making a very foolish mistake, with pointed questions about whether the alliance would ever be there when it mattered. The later joint statement represented a significant diplomatic pivot, a shift from reluctance to commitment driven by the sheer economic pain being felt across continents as oil prices surged and commodity markets convulsed. Here is the reality of what the economic damage actually looked like beyond the headline oil price figures. According to reporting from multiple outlets tracking the crisis, the closure disrupted not just crude oil, but aluminum markets, fertilizer prices, and in a detail that surprised many observers, global helium supply chains. A major liquefied natural gas export hub was struck by Iranian drones, causing a fire and disrupting operations. Iran's attacks on energy infrastructure were not random. They were targeting the nodes of the global energy system with surgical intent. Shipping insurance markets told the story in cold financial terms. Before the conflict, war risk insurance premiums for transit through the strait ran at a tiny fraction of ship insurance value per transit. By the days immediately before the strikes began, that had already jumped significantly. For a very large crude carrier, a supertanker, that translated to an additional $250,000 per single crossing. And once the conflict erupted fully, war risk insurance was effectively withdrawn entirely, making the economic calculation for most ship owners straightforward. The strait was closed not just by force, but by the mathematics of risk. This is why reopening it was not merely a military objective. It was an economic emergency of global proportions. Let us take a moment to put all of this into the larger context. What we are witnessing is the shattering of a doctrine Iran spent more than 40 years building. The Strait of Hormuz was always Tehran's ultimate leverage, its nuclear option short of an actual nuclear weapon. The assumption was that any adversary would hesitate to pay the cost of dismantling it. That assumption has been shattered. The cost was paid. Iran's shore-launched missile batteries are largely silent. Its naval fleet has been decimated. Its naval commander is dead. Its underground missile stockpiles have been reduced by 90%. Its drone production facilities have been targeted. Its naval bases have been struck within hours of the conflict's opening. The architecture of the blockade, 40 years in the making, collapsed in a matter of weeks. And yet, the lesson for the future is not simple triumphalism. The asymmetric threat, cheap drones, hidden mines, mobile launchers, remains partially intact. Iran's capacity to produce thousands of drones monthly, while degraded, has not been fully eliminated. The mines in the strait are still being cleared. The economic disruption, oil prices that surged 40% above pre-conflict levels, commodity markets from aluminum to helium thrown into volatility, the largest supply shock since the 1970s energy crisis. All of that is still being felt. The full normalization of the Strait of Hormuz remains a process, not an event. But the process is underway, and the direction is clear. Let us also talk about what this conflict reveals about the future of warfare itself, because that dimension deserves serious attention. The Strait of Hormuz operation has been a live demonstration of what military analysts call multi-domain operations, the simultaneous integration of air power, autonomous maritime systems, precision strike weapons, intelligence networks, and targeted decapitation strikes to achieve a unified strategic objective. No single element would have been sufficient alone. The stealth bombers could not neutralize the fast attack boats. The attack aircraft could not penetrate underground missile bunkers. The drone boats could not destroy shore-based missile batteries. But combined, synchronized across domains and timelines, they dismantled a multi-layered defense that had been under construction for 4 decades. The advanced penetrator bomb specifically deserves a place in that history. Developed beginning in 2017 and cleared for operational use in late 2021, it had never been used in a real conflict before the Strait of Hormuz strikes. Its combat debut validated years of investment and development. The weapon fills a critical gap between an older design from the early 1990s and a much larger, much scarcer massive ordnance penetrator. By using the intermediate weapon against the coastal missile sites, the military preserved its limited inventory of the larger bomb for higher priority nuclear-related targets, demonstrating not just operational effectiveness, but sophisticated munitions management at strategic scale. And then there is the autonomous systems dimension, the piece of this story that points most directly toward the future. The drone boats operating in the strait were not a novelty. They were a proof of concept. Unmanned surface vehicles conducting sustained patrol operations covering hundreds of hours of mission time, capable of being redirected from surveillance to kamikaze attack as the tactical situation demands. Paired with autonomous mine-hunting systems designed to trigger controlled detonations without risking a single sailor, you are looking at the shape of maritime security operations for the next generation of conflict. Iran understood this asymmetric equation intimately. That is why it had spent so heavily on cheap, mass-producible threats, drones, mines, fast attack boats. The logic was sound in theory. Overwhelm an adversary's capacity to respond with individually inexpensive but collectively devastating tools. What it did not account for was the development of autonomous systems that could counter asymmetric threats at asymmetric cost. The drone boats do not require a crew. The mine-hunting drones do not require a diver. The math of asymmetric warfare just shifted. This is the deeper lesson of the Strait of Hormuz campaign. Not just that Iran lost this round, but that the tools being deployed here will define the next decade of conflict. What we have seen is the debut of a new era of power projection. The advanced bunker buster making its first combat appearance and delivering results that will be studied in military academies for decades. Autonomous drone boats conducting hundreds of hours of patrol and deterrence operations in contested waters. A strategic decapitation that removed the single officer most responsible for the blockade. An air campaign of a scale and intensity that has imposed lasting constraints on Iran's strategic options. The story of the Strait of Hormuz is not over, but the most dangerous chapter may well be behind us. The mine-clearing operations continue, coalition partners deploy their assets, and the daily ship crossing numbers climb back toward normal.